Hello, how's everyone doing today? I'm Dylan.
I'm John.
Thanks for joining us again with our Facebook Live. This is actually our first one of the year, so we're going to kick off January right. We got John over here. He's going to give the coffee mug shout out of the day.
Yeah, so today, thank you to my friends at Paycom. Been friends of ours, honestly, for years at Humareso. So thanks, Paycom. Thanks for the mug. Here's your shout out.
All right, awesome. So before we kick it off with the questions, I want to thank everyone for tuning in who's going to tune in at the moment and those who will tune in later. Last time we left off with a question about the interview process, so we're going to go ahead and leave off there. So I'm going to ask you, what stands out when interviewing a candidate?
Say that again?
What stands out to you when interviewing a candidate?
Well, I mean, a couple things first. I think the standout, besides just the candidate thing, but what is the job about?
Mm-hmm.
So I try to take my time to look at the actual job description, the job ads, because sometimes the ads are a little more marketing based than the actual job itself. So we try to make things seem a little sexier than they really are. So I want to make sure that I really understand that. So that's a standout for me because I can speak competently to the person that I'm talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And this way, on the other side of it, when the candidate has an opportunity to respond, they're doing so specifically to what the job is asking for. So that stands out to me then on the candidate side, that they can really understand the work that they're to be doing and then how they fit into the accomplishment of that work, how that work fits into what their understanding is, at least, of the overall mission of the organization. Again, I know these people are coming in not already part of the organization, so I don't necessarily give them points off if they don't 100% have the mission right, but I can tell if they've done some research, right? And that's a standout. If they've kind of looked into the company, what do they do? How do they do what they do? What difference have they made? Those kinds of things. I like hearing people talk about that and then tell stories about what they've done and
Mm-hmm.
how that fits.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point too, because honestly, for myself, in the past, when I first started the job applications and sending them in through Indeed or Monster, I would just find
So many people have comments about Indeed and Monster.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I would just find these jobs that were recommended to me, and then I just apply even without brushing up on the company and figuring out what they're about to even see if I'm a right fit to begin with.
Yep.
But as I went on, I realized that stuff's very important, because if the opportunity does come down the road where you get an interview for that role, then you got to understand about the company, what you're talking about, and then seeing if you're actually a good fit for the position.
It's interesting though too, and I'll pick on Indeed for a second, and I'm going to be the first one to say I don't necessarily have a problem with Indeed. I know online some people give grief to Monster, Career Builder, Indeed, those folks, because it can just come to your phone and you just push, apply, and you don't ever read anything because it's the notification. To me, though, one of the things that candidates forget, though, is that if they are a habitual applier, there are times, depending on how large your company is, you can see how many jobs they've been applying for. If this is the 5th application for an opening in your company, do they even read these things? I think you're right. I'm not inclined to think that they're really taking the time to understand what it is that they want to do first, which is a problem. And then secondly, how they'll actually make a contribution to the company they're applying to. So, do I think it's the software's fault? Do I think the people, though, applying, the candidates applying, have to take more time to really put their best foot forward? There are habitual appliers that just won't get the shake, because they're applying for customer service, for accounts receivable, for roles across the board, marketing associate, and you're like, I get that some people just will take anything to get into the company. I do understand that. I don't know that that's really the long-term play, though.
You make a great point. All right, so off of that, we're going to bounce to the next question. Can you tell if you will hire a candidate in the first minute of the interview?
In the first minute, I can tell when I won't hire a candidate in the first minute. That's a for sure. And sometimes those things are, and I appreciate that everybody has a preference about certain things. But, if you're going to just start in the interview with me using foul language, it isn't about being a prude, quite honestly. It just makes me feel, how comfortable do you think that you are with people to start right away with sort of that vernacular? What will you do with clients or customers that you're talking to? That is a put off for me, and I know people are going to give me a hard time, and I appreciate that. But that for sure is in the first minute, I'm like, this is going to be tough, because I don't even know you, right? Why would you be this comfortable with me? Again, if they're not really dressed appropriately, if they aren't prepared, there's no resume, there's not, and I get the whole, maybe we should get rid of resumes. I understand that, but when you're coming to talk to somebody, bring stuff, bring a portfolio, bring examples of work. Does it have to be a resume? Not necessarily, but brag. This is your chance to brag. If you just kind of walk in and you're like, hi, what are we going to talk about? There are people, though, I would say, in the first minute of conversation that I can tell that there's a spark, that there's an energy, that there's a vivacity to them. And for me, you can't train that. So when people walk in kind of secure in that way, that stands out to me. And I'm more inclined to want to listen to the rest of their story. It does not mean that I'm going to necessarily hire them for that particular role. But I will tell you, in my career, it has meant that I've held on to their resumes and said, when the right role comes up, I want to circle back. And I've had that conversation with people when I follow up with them to say, unfortunately, this role is not the right role for you. But if it's okay with you, I really would like to keep the door open. Should there be something in this area, would you be okay with me contacting you again? Of course, most people are like, sure, no problem. I can't say that I've always gotten, 6 months later when I've called some of these people, they were like, gosh, I've been waiting for you. They need to eat. I get that. But there have been some folks who have come back and were excited that, we really did hold on to their resumes and followed up on that info.
Yeah, you make a great point there. All right, going into the next question. What advice would you give someone going into an interview?
Well, some of it I kind of mentioned, have your brag on stuff with you. Don't be braggadocious, but have your stuff that you're going to point to say, this is why I would be effective in this role. I think a candidate needs to do their research on the company. Read all kinds of stuff. Do not just go to Glassdoor. Again, sorry, Glassdoor, I'm fine with you, but don't just go to the one site and read what, 4 disgruntled employees have to say. Well, 4 disgruntled employees out of 4,000 employees, okay, it's not too bad. And those disgruntled employees, half the time, if you ever get to do the research, they work there for 2 days because they were terminated because, they wanted to take their shoes off and pick their toes in front of customers. I mean, it's crazy stuff. So again, I would make sure that you have as well-rounded of a research plan. If you're a candidate, show that you're serious. I would say, too, that candidates need to be smart about understanding the job. If you've applied for it, what you're telling the company is, I can make a contribution to this. And so your language, your answers to questions should always push back to that. And some people, have heard me talk about, that lousy question of, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Which, if you're doing interviews, stop asking that question. I mean, you don't know where you're going to be in 5 years. Why do you think the person across the table is going to know where they should be? But if I'm asked that question, okay, I got to ask that question. Turn it around to come back to the job of today. In 5 years, certainly if I get to have a role like this and I learn this skill better or have opportunity to demonstrate these competencies that I already have in this context, I would imagine that there'll be more opportunity for me to move forward in this aptitude or be able to teach others, and develop their skills. Speak generally, but come back to the role. So I think candidates need to do a better job with that. I also think, and I know this is funny, eye contact is a big deal. Shake hands, greet warmly, look at the person all the way through the interview. I think that those basics are not meant to sort of be fads. They're basics because everybody should be doing that. And we kind of have moved away from that. Even if you're video interviewing, be smart about where the camera is versus where the screen is you're looking at. When you're unintentionally looking down all the time because you're just looking at the video playback, look up to the camera at the top of your laptop as often as you can when you're answering the question of the person. You don't need to see, everything that person is doing. You get it. You can see them peripherally. Look at them. Give them the eye contact, even by video. I think some of those things might be helpful for people in the kind of the modern workplace today. And then follow up after the interview. Send an email. Send a note. Send some more proof of competency. If something comes up in the interview, you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I've done that before, and you didn't bring it with you because you just didn't know it was going to come up. After it's over, send them a link to that video or copies of the work, whatever it is. Follow up with things that are germane. It'll show folks that you're really serious about the role.
Yeah, and what I've learned is, just coming out of college and, interviewing for internships during college, we had like mock interviews. So I would always practice an interview, and that definitely helped me pick up key things. Maybe during one, I would forget something, but doing time and time again, eye contact, and then even like you said, the follow-up is very important. In the beginning, I would never follow up, but following up makes a big difference because it shows extended interest in the job.
And if you remember, of course, I'm going to put you on the spot now. When we first got together and we're chatting about this potential marketing role, in the interview, in the time we chatted, you continued to use a phrase a lot. Do you remember?
Yes.
What was the phrase?
Stuff like that.
Stuff like that. You would end almost all of your sentences. I did this and this and stuff like that. And it was a habit.
Yeah.
Right? It was a bad habit, and it minimized, the quality of the content you were bringing up because it was a distraction. It kept being kind of overshadowed by and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it also, and again, this is good for everybody listening. To your point, record yourself. Have somebody interview you. Give them, a bunch of questions to ask and let them interview you, or have them, if they're really, into it, have them come up with their own questions. So you can be prepared for what the answer should be and not get stuck in those phrases, right? Or the like.
Yeah.
Like I was so busy all the time. All right, you were busy. I get it, right? You just get rid of some of that verbiage so it makes your answers more streamlined and you give the right foot forward.
I agree. All right, going into our last question is actually, what is the question that is most important to you when going into an interview?
What is the question that's most important? What is the question that I ask?
Yes,
that's
I
most
do
important?
ask is most important.
Well, I can give away all that stuff, but some of it has to be mine. I think there's a lot of things that you could ask as an interviewer, and then maybe that's something we can talk about, next time through. But I think that what I would say to the interviewer, kind of in setting that up, have questions to ask. Don't just ask like, hey, so tell me about college, or hey, tell me about the last job. That's way too general, right? So you've got to be more specific. So spend some time prepping for that.
All right, sounds good. Like you said, we'll kick that off in our next Facebook Live. For today, I want to thank everyone who joined in with me and John to listen up on the interview process. We look forward to having you next time. And like I said, for those who are going to be listening later today, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
See you guys.